Doyle played an audio clip yesterday from WGN in Chicago, and that clip featured feedback from people responding to the Country Financial Index. In short, the index is a very accurate measurement of how Americans feel about their financial security. Duh. And next up is the guy who covered and created that index. His name is Scott Rasmussen. He's founder and president of Rasmussen Report and frequent guest on Fox News, CNBC, and many others. Mr. Rasmussen and his firm have developed a reputation for delivering accurate public opinion and accurate public opinion feedback. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who's great with the numbers and telling us exactly what they mean for your clients, ladies and gentlemen, Scott Rasmussen.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the nation's air, man. Breathe the mountain air, man. Travel I've been.
I am really impressed with the lengths that country will go to make me feel welcome. I came out here from Asbury Park, New Jersey. Our offices are 2 blocks down from the Stone Pony, a location that Bruce Springsteen made famous. And he had the E Street Band out here early on to welcome me. So I appreciate that. I also, and they were good, by the way. I also appreciate the fact that we've had a chance to work together over the past 3 years on the Country Security Index. The only problem with this financial security index has been that when we started on a scale from 0 to 100, the security was at 70, and now it's down to 63. That's not a good trend, and obviously it's based on what's going on throughout the nation. But sometimes numbers get in the way. I mean, we have numbers on everything. We've asked 1,000 men, do they prefer blondes, brunettes, or redheads? And by the way, the answer is brunettes. We also know that women prefer a clean-shaven face to a man with a beard. And we know that older women are more likely to prefer a full head of hair than younger women. You can figure out why on your own, but these are the numbers that we have that really don't matter all that much. And sometimes people get really excited about these numbers and they don't take a look at the context. And context is far more important than anything else when you start talking about statistics and polling data. About 3 years ago, I was doing a show on CNN. It was going to be the morning after the very first of what became way too many Democratic presidential debates. And Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and 8 other people were going to go head-to-head. And we got there, and the producer said, I want to call you as soon as the debate is over so we can get your instant reaction. And I was really disappointed because I wanted to watch the Yankees that night. And so when the producer called, the first thing she said was, what was your immediate reaction? What was it? As soon as the debate ended, what did you think? And I said, thank God I can turn on the Yankee game. And she was really a little miffed at that response and said, no, seriously, what were you thinking? And I told her that that was what was on my mind and on the minds of most Americans, that hardly anybody knew the debate was taking place. And in fact, most people, wouldn't have any sense of the news story that the political junkies were just salivating over. Last August, we had another example of this phenomenon. The President of the United States gave a major speech to the nation on the biggest issue of the day, health care reform. And when these speeches take place, all the pundits get together and have their spin sessions afterwards, and I really never watch those. What I do after a presidential speech is I go online and I look at the way local newspapers are covering it. And the reason I do that is because, again, you get a perspective from people who have a real life rather than living and breathing politics all the time. And when I was looking this night, the second paper I went to was the New York Post. And this is maybe 10 minutes after the president finished speaking, laying out his vision for the nation on this issue. And on the front page of the New York Post was a full-page photo of Derek Jeter, and it said, Jeter ties Lou Gehrig on Yankee Hit Parade. They didn't care what the president had to say because their focus was different. And I mention this to you because we all lose sight of what other people are going through. You're living and breathing financial security products. Most Americans spend less than 15 minutes a day talking or thinking about financial security products. It's just not a part of their daily dialogue. Now, they are interested, 48% will do some kind of budgeting, and they want to hear what you have to say. But when you go in to speak to them, it is an extraordinary event in their life, and it's being squeezed in among a whole lot of other things that are taking their attention away from it. And at this point, I had a really brilliant transition plan to go into some of the stats that we're going to talk about and why people are frustrated. But when I had dinner last night, the people said that I should tell you a couple of other stories. And since they were the people who invited me to speak, I thought I should listen and do what they said. And so this will be a brief diversion from the main points here of the day. But they said there were some sports fans in the room. Are there any sports fans here? Very quick story. This is how ESPN started on a $9,000 cash advance on a credit card. Back in 1978. Does anybody remember 1978? Okay. It's hard to believe there was only one college football game a weekend. They only showed one game in the Final Four basketball presentations. We didn't have March Madness or any of the other things. I was announcing for the Whalers hockey team. And by the way, to go back to Scott's comments earlier, I could go anywhere in the world and say, welcome to Hartford, Drogia Drusia, Postrofliajam Vas Hartford, because we played a series of international games. We went to try to get the Whalers on TV and could not do it. They wouldn't bump Charlie's Angels to put on a Whalers hockey game, even when we were in the playoffs. So we tried everything we could, closed circuit broadcast, other activities, and yet there was something missing. And we learned about this cool new technology called cable television, and we called a meeting of the Connecticut cable operators and said, we have a great plan for you. We're going to show you Whalers hockey, UConn basketball, and Bristol Red Sox baseball. And they all laughed at us. It was one of the great marketing flops of all time. But somebody in the room said, if you're really serious about this, you should look into the satellite. And what we found was that we could send a signal around America via satellite for less money than it cost to send the same signal around the state of Connecticut via traditional landlines. We had already taken out the $9,000 cash advance in our credit card. We had a company we called the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. So we called and found out about the satellite. And through a very unusual set of circumstances, we were able to get in position to get access to one of the only 24 satellite transponders that were available on this satellite. So we were excited about that. We had to sign a $2.6 million 5-year commitment that we didn't have the funding for, but we thought as long as you're going bankrupt, you may as well do it big. And it created a little tension around the house. And my father and I kept arguing about what to do with this satellite capacity. And finally, on August 16th, 1978, we decided to take a day off. We would drive to visit my sister at the Jersey Shore for her 16th birthday. We got stuck in traffic in Waterbury, Connecticut, and we were arguing and screaming at each other. Back then, I thought that the sons were always right in the argument. I have 2 college sons now. I have a different perspective. But back then, I turned and finally said to my father, I don't care what you do, show football all weekend, see if I care. Instead of yelling back, he said, that's it, not football, but sports. An hour later, we thought, let's do all sports all day, every day. And over the next 12 and a half months, we got Getty Oil to fund the idea with $100 million. We got the NCAA to provide programming. We signed NBC senior sports staff. And on September 7th, 1979, we had a glorious grand opening, except for our building wasn't quite ready because the control room looked nice, but it didn't have any equipment in it. So we had to drive a remote truck up to the back of our brand new building, poke a hole in the back wall, and run a cable through to do the very first SportsCenter broadcast of all time. And in the opening segment on SportsCenter, Lee Leonard was on stage, and a skunk walked in through the hole that we had just put in our brand new wall. And that was how ESPN started. It's been a long time, 31 years, but it's come a long way. And now let's transition to polling, but stay a little bit on sports. How many of you watched the Super Bowl? How many of you rooted for the New Orleans Saints? Now, of those Saints fans, how many of you are rooting for the Saints to win it again next year. What we just showed was something very important about polling. We found that 54% of people watching the Super Bowl wanted the Saints to win. And interestingly, 53% wanted Barack Obama to become president of the United States. But it wasn't, the 54% weren't really all Saints fans. Given the choice they had at the moment, they picked the Saints over the Colts. When Barack Obama was elected, there were a lot of people that voted for him, but some of them really thought Hillary Clinton should be there. Some of them thought anybody but John McCain should be there. Some of them didn't like either option, but thought, well, the idea of promising tax cuts to 95% of all Americans sounds like a pretty good bet. The Obama team, like almost every winning team, thinks the people were all excited about their candidate. They misread their election mandate, and that created some problems for them. That's why the numbers have been sliding a little bit for the president. On top of that, we have a difficult economy. We have high unemployment. We have a level of frustration that we haven't seen in the country for a long time. 75% of Americans now tell us they are angry at the policies of the federal government. 63% say it will be better for the country if most incumbents lose their job. 45% say that a group of people randomly selected from the phone book could do as good a job as the current Congress. And, you know, we have fun with these things, but only 21% of Americans now believe the government has the consent of the governed. And that's a real problem. And it is relevant to the discussions that you have every day because part of the financial frustration that people are feeling is tied directly to their sense that the political system is broken. I mean, the American people are united in the belief that our political system has broken down, that most politicians are corrupt, and that both parties are clueless. And that creates a sense of despair. In 1992, Bill Clinton was elected with a majority of Democrats in Congress. His party lost control of Congress during his tenure. George Bush was elected with a majority of Republicans in Congress. He lost control. That has never happened before in the history of our nation in back-to-back administrations. People have rejected both sides. Now, that feeds into the economic frustration, but the economic concerns also add to the political frustration. As of this morning, 7% of Americans believe that the economy is in good or excellent shape. 55% rate the economy as poor. And by the way, 47% think it's still getting worse. And as bad as those numbers are, they're actually an improvement from a year ago. While 55% say the economy is poor today, it was 68% a year ago. So on the one hand, we're saying, okay, things aren't quite as bad. The economy seems to be getting better. But people are not seeing it in their own personal finances. While people's perceptions of the economy has gotten a little bit better, only 30% of Americans now rate their own finances as good or excellent. That's down 3 points from a year ago. We see this same type of trend in the Financial Security Index data. When we started in 2007, 51% said that their own financial security was good or excellent, half the nation. It's down to 35% today. In 2007, 37% said it was possible for a middle-class family to save for retirement, for secure retirement. It fell to 36% in 2008, to 35% in 2009, and then a big drop to 30% this year. In practical terms, what it means is it used to be that people who earned $60,000 and up felt okay about the possibility of saving for a secure retirement. Now that number has moved up to the $75,000 range. But the other thing that that number tells you is something significant has happened over the last year. And we see this in lots and lots of data. When the recession began, people were concerned. They were, this happens in life, seemed to be a bad one, but there seemed to be a sense it's the business cycle. Over the last year, and really probably just the last half year especially, people are beginning to think something more fundamental has gone wrong. Right now, today, only 36% of Americans believe the economy will be stronger in a year, 42%. A bigger number say it'll be weaker. This sense that there is a lasting change has created a different type of pessimism. For the first time in a long time, we find that most people say today's children will not be as well off as their parents. We find that a majority say America's best days have come and gone. Part of it, and only part of it, comes from the political issues I mentioned earlier. A big part of it is what people are seeing in their own financial lives. We have a nation where half the people don't have any money left over at the end of the month after paying their bills. When gas prices spiked a couple of years ago, we were asked, how are people saving money? Are they going to carpool more? Are they going to buy a different car? The biggest response was people cut back on groceries because that was the only disposable cash they had to cut back on. We're in a country where people who have played by the rules for a long time aren't so sure the rules work anymore. You can look at it at a macro level. People were really unhappy with the bailouts, whether it was the auto industry or the banks or anybody else. Part of the reason they were upset was because taxpayer dollars were going out, but part of it was this isn't the way the system was supposed to work. If a company loses enough money, it's supposed to go out of business. It's not supposed to be propped up by taxpayers. That was a breach of trust that a lot of people were frustrated about, and adding to that frustration was, despite the clear public opposition, policy leaders went ahead with it anyhow. And let me give you just an example of how deep the sense of betrayal is at that level before taking it to a personal level. We asked people, is capitalism a better system than socialism? 53% said yes. Only 53% were willing to say that capitalism is better than socialism. We asked a different set of questions and asked, are free market economies better than government-managed economies? Nearly 80% said yes to that. We were curious, how come people say free markets work but capitalism doesn't? And what people have come to believe about our system today is that capitalism as practiced in the United States means if you're well connected, you can get bailed out of anything. It means there's two sets of rules, one for small business people, one for most of us, and one for a group that's a political and economic elite. And that is a very unhealthy thing about our system today, about the faith in our system today. On a personal level, we have a generation of Americans who were brought up, taught some basic things about the way to plan for your future. One of them was you save some money, you buy a house, you pay down the mortgage, and that's your hedge against inflation. It's a good long-term investment. And yet today, only 53% of homeowners, just half the nation's homeowners, believe their home is worth more than their mortgage. That's not the way it was supposed to work out. A quarter say their home is not worth more than the mortgage, and the rest really aren't sure. And they're not optimistic. People do not expect housing prices to recover for at least 5 years. We also were told, set aside money in your 401ks. And that worked great until September of 2008. And now people are looking at their returns every month and saying, once again, I did the right thing, but it didn't work out the way it was supposed to. This frustration with the system that people don't quite know what to do with has created a deepened pessimism about the future of the country. It used to be, we would ask these questions sort of just to prove the basic beliefs of America. Is it possible for anybody who really wants to work to find a job? It used to be overwhelmingly yes. Today, only 45% say that's true. Less than half now believe it's possible for somebody to work their way out of poverty. This sense, again, that our political and economic system has gone through a fundamental change has now led people to look out at their future in a different way. They're not sure what it means. They don't know what the answers are, but they know that what they've been doing and practicing for a long time is not the same thing they have to keep doing going forward. And when we try and categorize this, when we try to figure out what are the solutions that people are looking for, it becomes much more difficult because there aren't a set of clear answers. What we now have is a set of 4 things that I think are really helpful to you in understanding people that you're talking to. And I'm going to take a fair amount of time and go through these, but the first is that when we talk about financial security, most people believe that is an unattainable goal. When you walk in and talk about their financial security planning, they don't believe they can get there. That's not that's not the attitude you want to have, but it is what you're dealing with. They're looking at the facts saying, you know what? I should be saving to put money aside so I can get my kids to college. 80+% expect to pay at least half of their child's college education. This is a basic core value of parenting today, so they know they have to do it. And at the same time, they know they need to set aside money for retirement. And you walk in with your plans and you begin to lay out how to get there, and the answer is, I can't. They don't want to give up. They want to do what they can. And so depending on the issue of the moment, they'll put a little more money aside or a little less money aside. And in the last year, people have begun to tap into those savings more and more, which again adds to the frustration. But they are looking at pragmatic choices to reduce insecurity, which is where you can help them. They're trying to think through rationally, what can I do in this environment? What can I do, recognizing that perfection, financial security, is not a possible goal, but is something that I would like to work towards. And when they do that, one thing that's really phenomenal when they look at all the polling data is that the American people are very pragmatic. You know what we found one of the great responses has been to the problems of recent years? People in their 50s are saying, I'm going to retire a few years later. Not because they want to, not because it was part of their new plan, but because they've just looked at the realities. And if they work a few extra years, maybe the markets will come back a little bit and they can have some better sense of retirement. So this whole idea of when you're going in and talking with them, they are looking for ideas to reduce insecurity, to think through what their choices might be, and to think through, okay, in a less than perfect environment, which one do I have to do first? And they're not looking for you to tell them the answer, they're looking for you to help them think through the answer. Now, as you're having these conversations, the second point is you're going to lay out some options for rational, logical steps they can take to reduce insecurity. And they're going to say, you know what? Somebody was here 20 years ago and told me to start setting aside money in my IRAs. Somebody was here before that saying I need to buy a home. Those things didn't work out. Why is this going to be different? And skepticism is very, very deep. there is a concern. It's not a concern about you as individuals. It is a concern about, will the rules change? It is a concern about the overall environment. But it is a sense, again, that if I have been following the rules for a long time, it didn't quite work out. Why is following the rules now going to be any different? And one of the ways to address that is to point out and to tap into the other aspect of reality for them. Even though the 401k hasn't worked out as well as they might have liked, it's better that they set that money aside and have some resources now. If they hadn't been saving for a long time, they wouldn't have that. It is better that they did buy a house, presuming they could afford it, and afford to maintain it, and have been building that equity. It may take a long time before things come back, but right now the environment is very bad for those particular assets. But still, it was a good discipline and has left them in a better position than if they had not invested that money. And I think helping them think that through is a part of addressing the question about where do you go from here. Now, the third thing that is a reality in all of this is that it is going to take a very, very long time before people believe things are turning around. When we poll on topics, we poll every night on consumer confidence. And almost always there is one issue that drives consumer confidence for a period of time. Back after 9/11, it was always international events. At various times it's been jobs. Right now it happens to be jobs. That may be shifting. There have been times when gas prices were the primary driver of consumer confidence. And what we would find is if the price of gasoline would spike, confidence would fall virtually overnight. And then, when the price of gas came back down, it would take 5 or 6 months or longer for confidence to get even close to the level it was at before the first price spike. And the second time it happens, the second price spike, it takes longer before confidence comes back. And we have been going through this cycle now with a difficult economy for a long time, where 1 out of 3 workers believes they could lose their job in the near future, where we're hearing these bad reports. One good economic report is not going to change people's minds at all. And you are going to have to recognize that time lag. In 1992, George Bush was defeated for re-election, and we learned after the first George Bush, and we learned after the fact that the recession ended during his time in office. But consumer confidence didn't rebound for 6 full years. We are still in the downward side of this. 71% of Americans say, I don't care what the economists tell us, we are still in a recession. So when you hear talk about things have turned around, we're heading on the uptrend, that may be true. We don't really know what's in the future, but there are signs that it could be true. But recognize that people you're talking to are going to be extraordinarily skeptical about it, and that they're going to want to see benchmarks, and they're going to want to take time to absorb it. And that leads to the fourth thing that is important to recognize about people's attitudes towards the economy and their personal finances. We can talk about statistics. We can talk about economic numbers. We can look at the unemployment report. We can look at all sorts of things. We can take a look at the details of the Financial Security Index. We can be logical about the overall economy. But that's not what people are seeing. The biggest single thing that affects people's perception of their financial condition and the economy is what they see all around them. People that work for firms that are hiring today are much more optimistic than people who work for firms that are laying people off. People who live in areas that whose housing market has been devastated are not going to believe any figures they read about a housing market recovery if they look down the street and see a house hasn't sold for a very long time. People who know somebody who was just laid off or is about to be laid off are going to have a more pessimistic view. And by the way, people who made an investment in a company that is not performing well, whose stock is not performing well, are going to be more pessimistic about the overall economy. It all comes back to reality in a personal level, and the reason for that is there is no public trust of media or the general environment. We know from lots of different polling that people simply don't believe what they hear from reporters. In a political sense, they believe that if a reporter found out something that would damage their favorite candidate, they wouldn't report it. In the economic sense, people are suspicious of the motives of financial reporters. What are they trying to sell as they're doing it? They tend to look at reporters and media coverage like a Wikipedia source. It's a nice data point, I should check it out myself. And every time there is a conflict between a reported bit of information and what people see around them, what they see around them will win. As we go into this next 5 years or so, we're going through another transition that is unsettling to people and adding to this problem, and that's the technology and communications change. You know, for me, I watch my boys grow up, and they never had to get terrified and call a girl for a date. They do it through IM. It's a different technology that I really can't figure out and work the way that they do. But these communications capabilities mean there is more personal contact coming, not less, and that is really becoming the media of choice. I absolutely guarantee you, if somebody that you were talking about gets a church newsletter advocating some perspective on the economy or on investment strategy, that will carry more weight than if they see it in the Wall Street Journal, because there is a personal connection there. And we're all going to have to figure out how to deal with those sorts of things, because everybody you're talking to has a different environment. Now, the good news, if you're sitting down and talking to these people, you will hear what they're hearing. You will see, and if you're listening to them, you will see their view of the world. And that is an important first step to understanding where their thoughts and concerns might be. Now, it's really easy in today's environment to be pessimistic. It's very, I mean, and you know, I threw out the statistics about Congress. You guys like the fact that a lot of them might lose their jobs. It's easy to talk about how people are pessimistic about the economy. It's easy to talk about how this lack of trust exists. But there is something underneath it that we can all tap into. And I hope we can as a nation. And I think it will just be a better environment for all of us if we recognize that underneath this level of frustration, there is a great faith in the United States of America. There is a great belief that this country will come back, that something will change. People are frustrated right now because they don't know what to do. They don't trust the Republicans or the Democrats. They vote against whichever party is in power. They don't know what to do other than go to work every day and work on their own budgets and their own financial plans. They don't know how to solve Social Security, but they know how to plan for their own financial retirement as best they can without counting on Social Security. And those individual acts are something that give people confidence. And I cannot begin to tell you how deeply embedded this long-term optimism is about the United States of America. People believe that this is still the last best hope of mankind. They still believe that something will turn it around. And again, they don't know what it is. They will tell you how bad it is with the deficits. They will tell you how bad it is with their neighbor who got laid off and who somebody didn't take care of properly. But if you get back to talking about reliance on their friends and neighbors, they'll feel good about that. If you talk about coming together as a community to do things, we see actions like that all the time. And that optimism is deeper than all the specific concerns. So again, as you are thinking of the people that you're talking to, the basic things to remember are that they are not living and breathing financial security issues every day. They're talking about it less than 10 or 15 minutes a day. Still causing stress. 1 out of 3 say they've had arguments with family members about it, and 34% say that they've had somebody ask to borrow money. But it is not their primary discussion. So when you come in to talk about financial security issues, it's an unusual day for them. They are sitting there believing that the system is broken. They are sitting there thinking that I have done all of the right things and somehow it hasn't worked out. They believe that financial security is unattainable, but that it's important to reduce the level of insecurity. They don't trust what they see in the media. They trust what they see around them. And while they are discouraged and concerned, and while it's going to take a long, long time before the country can come back, there is a long-term faith in the future of the United States of America, and that is something positive to tap into. We're talking about a nation of people who are resilient and who are going to do what they can today to prepare for tomorrow and to move on a little bit further and hope that their kids can do a little bit better. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.